Hello and welcome back to the Movie Memo Recaps. Today we are going to recap a 2024 movie titled Roadhouse. Please be advised that there might be spoilers ahead. The film begins with a secret combat arena in a small Montana town, where a woman named Frankie goes to meet a man named Carter, who consistently wins fights. She wants to hire him to defend her beachside tavern in Glassy City. Frankie discovers Carter is fighting in the arena and is pleased to learn that he has won 6 fights in a row. Shortly afterwards, another man challenges Carter in the arena. Carter is extremely prideful and believes no one can beat him. However, when Carter realizes Dalton is his opponent, he decides to withdraw, fearing the implications of a confrontation with Dalton. Despite being labeled a coward, Lewis, having lost a $500 bet because of Dalton, unexpectedly stamps him with a knife. Shortly after, Frankie notices Dalton trying to treat his wound and offers him a position as a guard at her pub, Roadhouse. She promises to pay him $5,000 every week for a month because certain troublemakers have been causing havoc at the pub every night. Frankie attempted to contact the police for assistance, but it was unsuccessful. A friend advised Frankie to look for a man named Carter here, but after seeing him, Frankie decided she preferred to hire Dalton instead. Dalton, on the other hand, declines Frankie's offer to work with her, advising her to find someone else. Undeterred, Frankie puts down her barn's address and promises to wait if he changes his mind. Shortly after, Dalton drives to a railway crossing while listening to a radio broadcast about a UFC brawl. Instead of waiting, he feels compelled to do the unthinkable: park his car in the path of an incoming train. After surviving, Dalton decides to visit Frankie. At the bus stop, Dalton meets Charlie, a young girl who works in her father's bookstore. Charlie asks Dalton what attracted him to this small town, and he says he came to work at the Roadhouse. Stephen and his daughter are startled to learn that someone new is willing to work there. Stephen then directs him to Roadhouse. After arriving at Roadhouse, Dalton meets Laura, the bartender, and Billy, a waiter who recognizes him. Billy is aware that Dalton was once a highly respected UFC fighter. Hearing this, Dalton is pleased that someone still remembers him and is grateful to be in such a tranquil location. As night falls, Dalton likes the bustling atmosphere and music. Suddenly, a group of troublemakers walks into the bar. It seems out they've been making problems at Frankie's pub lately. Dell, the gang's leader, starts causing a commotion by damaging objects and pestering the female employees. Billy attempts to intercede at this point, but Dalton notices the issue and approaches them, instructing Billy to oversee the other customers. Dalton then offers to Dell that they talk outside the pub, but Dell is hesitant because he is still enjoying causing trouble inside. They eventually go outside, where a fight breaks out. Rather than retaliate, he decides to take them to the hospital because they have damaged bones and terrible bruises. At the hospital, Dalton meets Ellie, a doctor who is dissatisfied with the disruption generated by these thugs. She and her coworkers must labor extra hours to treat their ailments. To avoid such a catastrophe, they could have called the cops, but Dalton believes it would have been ineffective because the cops do not care about these folks. Ellie attempts to treat Dalton's stomach wound as it reopens unexpectedly. After returning from the hospital, Frankie sees Dalton and pays him his weekly money as arranged. Frankie also allows Dalton to stay aboard her uncle's boat rather than spend money on a hotel, but tells him to be cautious because there is a crocodile living beneath. The next day, Dalton awakens to Laura aboard the boat, who gives him food. Laura commended him for dealing with Dell and his buddies because, prior to his arrival, there were several guards at Roadhouse who could only stay 2 days. Laura was considering leaving, but after seeing what Dalton accomplished, she changed her mind and hoped things would better. The scene shifts to a yacht where Mo and Snap confront their boss, Ben. Ben is the mastermind behind the chaos caused at Roadhouse in hopes of taking over the place for his own personal benefits. Ben also asks about Dell's location, as he is not present. Mo explains that Dell remains in the hospital following the fight. This revelation irritates Ben even more because he paid them to intimidate the Glassy inhabitants, but they were beaten by a barkeeper. On the other hand, Roadhouse resumed its regular bustling environment, with people gathering to enjoy themselves. Dalton notices the disturbance and teaches Billy some rudimentary fighting tactics to help him manage the mob. He urges Billy to remain calm and not be afraid, telling him to take a step back, duck, and then deliver a quick punch if necessary. Billy gradually takes up Dalton's advice, and this helps him progress at work. On the other hand, Dalton is haunted by recollections of his previous UFC fights. He meets Ellie by coincidence while eating breakfast at a cafe. At that point, Ellie gently warns Dalton about how to cope with challenges in Glassy. She warns him to be cautious since getting on the wrong side of someone might lead to big difficulties, and the cops aren't as helpful as they could be. Despite the caution, Ellie encourages Dalton to continue living his life at Glassy and having fun in his own unique way. Dalton visits Frankie's room in the evening to collect his weekly pay and take a look around. Frankie also thanks Dalton for his stay there. As Dalton walks home across a bridge, Dell's car attempts to hit him. Despite the attempt, Dalton survives and returns to the boat where he is staying. However, he is surprised to see Dell already there, armed with a gun and determined to kill him. Dell is upset that Dalton interfered with his goals, and he hopes they don't cross paths again. During the fight, Dell falls into the sea, but the fabled crocodile appears and devours Dell's body. The elderly guy with Dalton speculates that the crocodile may have hidden Dell's remains, similar to how it consumed his dog. He wonders why Dell was there, and speculates that he is interfering with their business. Dalton has a suspicion, so he goes to Charlie's place to learn more about Roadhouse and other spots. Following that, he realizes that Roadhouse's location is ideal for exporting goods by sea due to the neighboring deep waterways, which allows ships to dock conveniently. Dalton returns from Charlie's only to discover Ben's thugs waiting for him outside. One of them, Sam, informs Dalton that Ben wants to meet him. Sam also threatens to seize Dalton by force if he does not comply, which Dalton finds humorous and recommends that if Sam wants to be threatening, he should act more convincingly. He maintains that if Ben wishes to speak, he should come to the Roadhouse, where Dalton works. Shortly after the events of the previous night, Frankie is astonished to discover Dalton in her room and inquires about his health. She is relieved to learn that Dell has died, but Dalton is more worried with why Dell was always causing trouble at Roadhouse. Sam, on the other hand, meets Ben and informs him that the guard has wounded his finger, as well as the message that if Ben wishes to meet, he must do so himself. Ben feels upset at hearing this, as the unexpected arrival of Dalton interrupts his plans for the place. At that point, his phone rings, but when he discovers it's from his father, he throws it into the sea. Meanwhile, an inmate at a Florida correctional facility contacts a hitman named Knox, requesting help with an issue caused by his son's behavior. Meanwhile, Ellie meets Dalton on the boat where he is staying and invites him to a private location using a boat she owns from her ex-boyfriend. They spent the afternoon together on a submerged island, enjoying one another's presence. Ellie informs Dalton of the police's failure to locate Dell's body and warns him not to interfere with certain people, particularly Ben, a prominent member of a well-known Florida family that built most of the city. This scares Dalton, so he begs Ellie to take him back to the pier, especially since she has no idea who he is. Ellie then admits she knows Dalton's true identity and what happened to him. After a lengthy travel, Knox arrives at Ben's house. Shortly after, Ben arrives and confronts Knox, who strikes him and claims he is there on his father's orders. Ben's father gave him instructions to clean up the mess he had made. Despite his father's imprisonment, his network and spies remain cautious, regularly watching Ben's movements. Knox will treat Ben's residence as his own and look into the guard who disrupted his business. He promises him that he will handle the situation, convinced that there is no problem he cannot fix. Shortly after returning from the picnic, 2 police officers approach Dalton and invite him to accompany them to answer questions concerning Dell's death. They lead him to a location where he meets Sheriff Tom Lem, who claims to be the highest authority in Monroe County, specifically over Glassy. Tom wants Dalton to leave peacefully, warning that refusal may result in his arrest. Uneasy about Tom's menacing conduct, he forces Dalton out of the car and begins assaulting him. Just as Tom is about to shoot him, Ellie, who has been suspicious since she escorted him down to the pier, steps in to stop her father's actions. It is revealed that Tom is Ellie's father. She describes how, when her mother died, she fled Glassy but returned when she discovered her father's relationship with Gerald, Ben's imprisoned father, who ran a fleet of rental boats for tours and narcotics. Her father now works for Gerald's son, and she wants Dalton to leave Glassy right away. Meanwhile, we see Vince and Sam at Steven's bookstore, planning to demolish it. That night, Dalton was already at Roadhouse when Ben arrived. At that point, Ben tries to bribe Dalton into leaving the city by showing him a YouTube video of Dalton's last UFC fight, which was removed due to a horrible incident. Ben says that Dalton fought and killed his close friend, and the incident ruined everything he had accomplished. After that, Ben says goodbye. Knox then entered the Roadhouse and started causing problems. Dalton eventually joined the fight, but the thugs teamed up and hit him terribly. Dalton felt as if he couldn't accomplish much more in that situation after the protracted fight. After that, he decided to resign his work and leave town, despite Frankie's accusation that he was a wimp for fearing those individuals. Dalton arrived at the bus stop only to witness Steven's bookstore burnt. He asked the firefighter about Charlie and her father's whereabouts, and discovered that they had been sent to the hospital by ambulance. Seeing this, Dalton decided to stay in town and take out Ben and his guys. Dalton then arrived at Ben's apartment and discovered Vince cleaning up. Dalton told Vince that he intended to depart and avoid dealing with their gang again. However, their behavior towards Charlie drove him to return and face them. Dalton suddenly administers a single hit to Vince's throat, rendering him unable to breathe. Just as Dalton was about to leave, he ran into M.O. and inquired about Ben's location. M.O., visibly terrified, stated that Ben would be having a meeting where he expects a certain sum of money. The video then cuts to Dalton's final fight in the UFC arena. Dalton was competing for the coveted heavyweight championship at the time with his best friend. However, driven by emotion, he lost control and accidentally killed his comrade in the arena. Dalton is currently on the coast, monitoring the transfer of a large sum of money to the bank. He planned a strategy to intercept the money and disable the police who were supposed to deliver it to Ben. Back on his boat, Dalton built a bomb as part of his plan. Shortly after, Tom approached him and asked him to return the money to Ben. Tom claimed that they had taken Ellie hostage and threatened to harm her if the money was not returned promptly. Tom begged with Dalton to help him retrieve the money before noon, underlining the necessity of his daughter's protection. Dalton, moved by Tom's plea, decided to help and promised to personally bring the money to Ben. After forcibly hauling Ellie's ex-boyfriend's boat, Dalton went straight to Ben's yacht out in the middle of the ocean. Dalton arrived and discovered Ben and Tom, who were calm despite Ellie's apparent incarceration. Tom revealed that Ellie's kidnapping was a ruse to bring Dalton there. Tom, on the other hand, was upset when he discovered that Ben had kidnapped Ellie without his knowledge, and he wondered why his daughter was involved. Knox suddenly came up to them aboard a stolen boat. Dalton seized the opportunity and exploded his explosive, generating a large explosion. Among the turmoil, Dalton searched for Ellie, who was stuck inside the boat. After releasing her, Ellie boarded a ship where Ben was waiting. At that point, Ben overpowered her and carried her away, while Knox pursued Dalton and attempted to kill him. Despite Knox's efforts, Dalton managed to grip the boat's rope and attempt to hurl him off. Dalton then smashed the boat, leading Knox to jump aboard Ben's boat and dive into the sea. Knox survived and attempted to reach shore, heading towards the Roadhouse. Meanwhile, Dalton narrowly evaded Ben's harpoon shot and began confronting him, just as Knox arrived, smashing his stolen car. Their second confrontation occurred there. Dalton and Knox fought fiercely, each using their fighting abilities to defeat the other. Knox was about to stab Dalton in the stomach with a sharp stick when Ben interrupted, ordering Knox to kill Dalton right away. Knox was displeased with Ben's command and turned on him, breaking his neck and killing him. Despite his injuries, Dalton rose and stabbed Knox repeatedly with the sharp sticks until he died. Tom, who had arrived on the scene, begged Dalton to go immediately and promised to cover up his activities. As the film ended, Dalton was seen waiting at a bus stop for a ride home. Charlie, who had been discharged from the hospital, thanked Dalton for his actions. Dalton then gave her and her father a bag containing Ben's money before leaving. Thanks for watching. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more of these recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.